They call a meeting to order and ask that you stand for the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. Special thanks to CFS and their
know.
representatives. So there is a sort of sub agenda that was printed out. So Brian, do you want to go ahead and from CFS? You and I have met. You've met a number of council members, but for those who haven't met, Brian's been the lead for CFS. We've met a few times. Laura has met with her, Danielle has met with them. So if you guys want to just do quick introductions, and if you have any questions for us as far as who we are, who we represent privately or professionally, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, I think you all met me, what was it, 3 weeks ago probably when I was here, so I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I think they kind of went over my background then, and I've been with the company for quite a while. So Eric, you.
Eric Newsom, co-president, CFS. CLA operations, so all the grain processing plants, the two here in Michigan, one in Pennsylvania, one in Nebraska, and working down here some on the right plant, just kind of looking over, taking inventory, what's there, and looking at working on buying, see if we can put together a plan to make it viable.
Brett Guinan, I'm a plant manager now with ZFS. I've been at the plant since it opened in 2007 in one way, shape, or form through all the ownership, and I'm still out there now. Looking forward to moving forward, hopefully.
Kurt Brower, Warren Norcross and Judd. I'm assisting Brian and Eric and Brad and putting a plan together to help make this facility operational.
Great. Well, like I said, welcome. You have an idea of where you want to start?
Yes, it's really everything we should cover is what questions you have and what you want to cover, but we put together the handout that we sent just only last Friday, but wanted to have some things in writing to maybe be easier to kind of get up to speed and everything, so we can go through that a little bit and discuss that. And that has a lot of what we wanted to communicate, which was to get to know, we introduced ZFS a little bit when we were here last time, but just to share a little bit more about our organization and who we are and our background, to have that as something you can just look at and get a reference point on better. And then some information on the industry that plant is in, along with some of the background that you probably knew a lot of that anyway, but just our perspective on the actual plant there and the business opportunity and challenges there for the plant and why there are those challenges, to get into some of the industry areas. And then more going to the water and sewer specifics on how that infrastructure piece, how the structure that is here and the cost is unique compared to other plants in the industry. And then some ideas that we had on the framework of the potential for a solution that could work for everybody. So that's what we tried to put together in writing ahead of time to kind of cover what could have taken probably an hour and a half verbally to go through some of that. So we can go back through some of the highlights in those areas. If you want me to just recap it, I could, or if you have specific questions.
Yeah, anything that you definitely want to make mention of or discuss, let's go ahead and start with the highlights and work our way through.
Sure. So the first page is just kind of summarizing the plant specifically here. A lot of this you probably already knew or are aware of, but just the fact that the plant is there with the acreage and being able to store and receive grain as one aspect of it, as well as to process the grain to produce ethanol and the co-products is another area there of what's there today. And what we've been looking at and working on, especially since July, is the grain receiving and storage areas of the plant we've been working on now and been working on for a couple of months, to be able to have those rehabilitated and operational, to at least be able to store grain there as a grain elevator. So that work is happening right now. It is not gonna be available to actually receive by the start of harvest. We're not sure when specifically it could receive, but we're hoping to be able to take grain in and at least run it as a grain elevator sometime this year yet, possibly catching a little bit of harvest, but we're working on the grain bins and the ability to store grain piles there as a grain elevator. So that we're working on now. And while we're doing that, we've been working on a business plan, which is the much harder and bigger business, is to restart the processing plant and actually process grain to make ethanol and the co-products, which are distillers grain, corn oil, and CO2. So we've been working on the business aspects of a plan to see if we can get everything together, that we have confidence that it will likely be able to succeed and compete in the industry today and where it's at. So water and sewer is a big part of the cost structure of a plant. So tonight in the water and sewer is a big part of this plan that we're looking at to see what can we put together. When we get it all together, how does it look like? And we're hoping that when we get that all there, that we will have the confidence that the plant will be able to compete. Whereas we got into a little bit in the outline. When this plant was built, there were very wide margins because there was a lot of demand for ethanol and not enough capacity to produce ethanol. And that quickly changed because of an opportunity. A lot of companies went into that opportunity and built plants, especially from about 2004 to 2009. And so the industry went from about maybe 50 plants at the beginning of that decade to about 205 plants by 2009. So that ended up overbuilding the industry overall. So there was a significant shift from 2007 to 2010. And then since then, it's been more of a gradual, continual tightening of just competition, where every plant, as most businesses are doing, they're looking at ways to be either producing more product with less, or reducing operating costs, or doing different things to get more and more competitive. And so that ends up having enough ethanol supply to the market at lower and lower margin in terms of the margin value difference between what the ethanol and products are worth versus the corn that's used. On how many cents per bushel of a margin is available to crush that corn. So that continued to tighten all the way through, and then COVID was kind of the icing on the cake. And when COVID happened, the demand for ethanol was cut in half overnight, as you can think of, no one driving. So that ended up temporarily closing a lot of plants, and then some of them that closed haven't restarted. This one might be some of that, and I'm not privy to all that went on prior to us. I think that Reg actually shut down before COVID, so it was just maybe an aspect of evaluating a restart. So today, roughly 10% of all the plants in the country that were ever built are not running, because they are not able to make a margin to do better than break even if the plant were to run. And so in our shoes, we're looking at that as what we're scared about, is hiring 50 people, committing to do all these things, purchasing and running, and then finding out that the business we put together is running in the negative. So we take that very seriously, to be reliable, to do what we say we're going to do. So that's our challenge here, is to look at everything in the business plan and the actual functionality of the plant to be able to get it competitive where it can break even and make a positive margin, even in the narrower margins that are available in the industry today. And so that isn't only water and sewer. I think some of it was outlined in here, but it's everything from the technology, efficiency of the processes that are at the plant, the physical condition of the equipment that's there, how much energy it needs to produce, the repair and maintenance required to the economics of water and sewer are a big one, electric rates are a big one, what happens with the CO2, the value of the other co-products are required today to have a plant be able to make a margin. It needs the revenue from the co-products to pay the bills. So all those have to come together on the commercial side, along with the plant physically being able to run. So that is what we've been working on to see if we can get a plan together that we are confident that if we make a run at this, we are likely to succeed, and we do a restart today and this plant runs ideally for 20 years through all those cycles, because we have a competitive model that is able to break even or make a margin in the market over time. So the water and sewer aspect is tough because all the plants that we're aware of, there might be some that we're not aware of. There's about 200 plants that have been built. And 10 or 20 of them basically are not running. I'm not aware of any of them that actually are using municipal water and wastewater services for their process itself. And that's what's unique here, just a hardship that isn't anyone's fault, but it's the way it is there now. So that most or nearly all of the cost of water and sewer that would go for the water and wastewater bill here for the municipal are costs that other plants don't bear, because they typically have wells or other water supplies that they pay capital maybe up front to have those sources, and then it's just the variable cost, like for a well, for electric, and a little bit of the treating they need to do for processed water. So other plants that are competing to sell ethanol cheaper than us to win the sale don't have that in their P&L as costs that they have to cover. And so that's a challenge we have here that is on the list of the top 4 or 5 commercial challenges, as well as the fact that the plant is 18 years old and hasn't run in 5 years. Those are other aspects that is more Eric's area and Brad on the ground right there physically. And then on the wastewater side, which is all linked together, water and sewer, if you think of it from a municipal perspective, what's unique is that the water required to process doesn't have to be drinkable, potable water, even though that's the way it's been connected here. And the wastewater that we're talking about here for the process is not biologically dirty the way you think of sewer or wastewater, in that it was only used to be transferring heat through the plant, through pipes, the boiler, the cooling tower, to transfer temperature around the plant. So there's some water treatment that goes in that water because of going through a boiler and so on, but it's not coming into contact, for instance, with the corn or anything biological to get really dirty. And so it typically can go right into a creek or a river without having to be treated. And the state actually has a classification of a permit for that. So that's the challenge we have here, is from the operating cost side to have it all work out where we can see it being able to compete, is having the municipal cost at this plant that isn't typical in the industry. So there's a bunch of other things we covered in writing here. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. I'm going to go to the company background. If there's more on that that you'd like to cover, had questions on, we can go over that too. I just kind of jumped into the plant specifically here and the challenges, but
you have a 20-year return on investment. Is that what your business plan is sort of modeling right now?
yes, forever is a long time, but in corn processing, our view is that these facilities should be able to operate for decades. It's a little harder in corn processing because ethanol is a unique product. We've always viewed corn processing as adding value to corn. It just so happens that ethanol is a high value product to be made from corn. And a lot of people don't realize that when you make ethanol, you make a lot of other products too, a lot of animal feed, corn oil, and CO2. That's even like the fizz in your pot, that's from CO2 that can come from a plant like this. So we look at it as adding value to corn. And so our view is that that ought to be a multi-decade view. So yes, when we're making long-term investment decisions, we are looking at a a time period of 15 to 30 years.
Okay.
On the corn processing side. As in the outline, we have a couple in soybean processing, we really view that as a 50-year view. Because that industry is 75 years old at least. The oldest plant that we have is 30 years old, and we sure view it as having 30 more years to go. But that is soybean processing.
And that's not taking place here, right?
What?
Is there any soybean processing scheduled to take place here?
No.
No, okay.
So I think the short answer is yes, our view is 20+ years that we should have. AS, not that it doesn't mean continual every year. There's maintenance and upgrades and replacements needed throughout, especially moving equipment, but that the facility itself. Should have a useful life of that or more.
And then, so you have two separate water systems. Do you know the percentages of what's being used for product ethanol production versus what's being used for heating and cooling? Because it all comes from one tap, right?
Well, actually, the structure, and we've just learned it more recently, I think we have it right. The main service that we're talking about tonight is process connections, which is a 10-inch water main. Where really, the pipe going to our plant comes over to the north side of Silverton Highway and basically directly connects to the village with a meter. Technically through the township because we're in the township, but there's a 10-inch supply line there. And an 8-inch wastewater line coming along the railroad tracks also up the Silverton Highway. So those are the two connections for processed water and processed wastewater. Then separate of that, off the Cemetery Road, there's a 4-inch water line and 2-inch wastewater line that are typical meter situations like a few other commercials probably in the township have. So that smaller line off the Cemetery Road goes to the offices and lab and some buildings for non-process uses. And so there's office and lab, traditional wastewater going to that wastewater line off Cemetery Road that is different than what I was talking about on the process side. If we compare the volumes, I don't know if we look closely, I would think it would be.
But just on the 10-inch. Do you know what the separation is?
So. It can depend a lot on how the plant's running and what rate of production it's running.
Yes.
And I think
There's
Danielle,
seasonal
you
factors.
guys have the historical information, which would be pretty accurate. We're always looking at where there could be improvements, including water efficiency, but you also have rate. The potential to produce a little more. It's not a precise exact number to the 1%, but we think something around 200 million gallons of processed water and 40 million gallons of processed wastewater is about what we're talking about. Maybe it's 180 million.
You want to say those numbers one more time for me, please?
200 million gallons of processed water coming into the plant.
Process coming into, yeah.
Yeah, and 40 million gallons of wastewater coming out. That's kind of clean wastewater.
Which is what you were saying about the corns, things like that.
The
Not to be in contact with the corns there.
non-contact, right? And you can look at the 20-year data probably to see how that compares. It might be, there was a year, it was 175 million instead of 200. And the wastewater might have been 35 million, so it, call it plus or minus 10 or 15% maybe, but. Kind of get the ballpark. Danielle probably has sharper numbers than I have.
I
but-
pulled back to 2010, was the easiest I could pull full year. I actually could go to 2009, but it's not a full year. And it does range, it fluctuates quite a bit. Anywhere from 178 million to all the way down to 133. So I averaged it out over the 9 full years that I had, and I have 10 years, but I cut the last year because that's when you guys, or they stopped producing. It's about 160 million a year.
Okay, so maybe it's a little less than those numbers. So possibly 180. The question would be how, if they had down times in there for reasons that would be different than how we would be viewing it, which is where the prior two owners own many plants, and so how they view the run rates of each plant could be different than us, and I don't know what that is, but it could be there's downtime in there versus. Our plan will be to run the plant 355 days a year, every year, that would be the goal. So I kind of rounded up, maybe 175 would be the more accurate number.
And I have no idea what the running was, or, I mean,
Yeah.
you can clearly see it in 2019 where they were using quite a bit and then it just goes to nothing. So I cut that year out, because that year they used 81 million gallons. But yeah, it's hard to tell before that, and then there's clearly like periods where it seems like they weren't fully running because they would go from like 15 million gallons a month to 4 million. So I'm guessing in those periods, something had to be going on.
Well, my point is 20% is not even going into use of production, so there's no value added to corn in that respect, it's just going to heating and cooling, so. You are taking water, mixing it with the corn, creating a mash and creating a product, but then you are using 20% just to heat and cool and power machines, steam, whatever.
Well,
That's, I was just trying to get a gauge as to what's.
yeah, there's a couple
What's
things
being
going
sold,
on
and
there.
what's being going down the street.
Well, the total gallons, maybe there are 180 million going into the plant for process and 35 or 40 coming back. So the water going in is, some of it is going in the plant in fermentation. And it's ending up in products being shipped out in the animal feed, for instance, and a lot of it is evaporating in the air. So water never is gone or consumed, it's just moved around. So if we use 200 in and 40 come out, that 160 differential either went up in condensation and is rained somewhere east of here, or it went out to our customers, like the distiller's grain has moisture in it, or when we dry the distiller's grain down, that moisture is being evaporated out. So none of the water is going any way, none of the water that's contacting the grain is going to the wastewater.
Right.
In that respect, so percentage wise, those are the numbers for process. The volume going to the lab and the office, I would think it'd be only a few percentages. I don't know if we've looked at the volumes, but it's
Is there a need
single
for a 4-inch line
percentages.
there? Can anybody explain why a 4-inch line would be needed there?
That's it.
I'm not sure how they're planning.
So I just put it in my house.
Well, that was sewer.
Sewer, I'm talking sewer.
It's a 2-inch wastewater line, is our
2-inch
understanding.
waste.
Yeah,
He said a 4-inch water.
yeah, that's just what was done 18, 20 years ago. I don't know that we've looked specifically at the volumes on that, but.
Like, any idea why that
But-
one did?
Health barrier.
Is that tied to your fire suppression?
Up the plant.
No,
Maybe the office?
possibly the office.
Well, the plant makes sense because you're running so much water, so that's what I'm wondering
Well,
if
the
the
plant-
office is.
Fire protection's off of the big tank.
Okay.
Well, the fire, for the diesel fire pump. Yeah, for the process.
And
I
the
remember
other
8 to
part of
10.
it from.
I running a 4-inch for the operations and then like the typical 3/4 inch for the office.
Yeah, it comes in at 4-inch and I believe it necks down to 2-inch before it goes into buildings. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
They probably just wanted it plenty big at the road.
Yeah, it comes in through our pit at 4. I believe it splits off after it goes to the air gas building and comes towards our buildings as our potable. I believe it goes down to 2-inch. From there,
I think you.
but it might be the distance it has to go is why that. It's not so much the quantity, because I mean, as far as our uses, it's bathrooms, sinks.
Yeah, and that's more of a typical meter service like other customers, where the big process lines are what's unique there. So. I'm trying to think of what else, maybe.
Have you had any engineering discussions about reducing the line, the 10-inch line? For production, do you need that much capacity?
Well, a a 4-inch line typically is maxed out depending on the pressure at roughly 100 million gallons a year. So a 4-inch line wouldn't flow enough water. So they just, the cost to construct, they probably just did 10-inch to make sure it would always be big enough for the flow needed, and then the pressure isn't as critical either, it could be at lower pressures.
Okay. Interesting.
That our view has been that the challenge is the variable cost to supply that much water. Has been really the challenge that we all have, where the 10-inch line, it's kind of a fixed cost, it's already there, it's fine, it doesn't really wear out. And it's good that it's plenty large.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, well, yeah, we can just open up for questions, I mean, I can. I'm trying to just think if there's any more highlights specifically part, the company overview. It's kind of self-explanatory, I went through some of the background of the plan, so. The challenge, like I said, is. What all the operating costs would be if the plant were running. Along with what the actual plant can do the way it is today, and what type of further investment is needed to get it current and into the efficiencies that it needs. To do a restart, and then longer term to really be competitive for the next 10 or 20 years, so. The rates that are in place today are really tough rates, it's a 7-figure water and sewer bill. So our hope has been. That there's a solution that would be workable for everybody where. We look at what, and it's sort of, it's laid down towards the end on the request portion of it is. Asking you to look at what your actual variable cost to serve the plant if it were operating, what that cost is. And then we look at that and then mark it up above that. So that you are confident, you know, that we are paying more than our fair share of cost and contributing to the system. And hoping that that real cost to serve is not anywhere near what's in the rate today of $1 million roughly. Because that is. Yeah, that's where we're looking at and hoping that there's a lot of spread there. To help the water and sewer bill. Be something we can get our heads around. To consider restarting this, so. That's what we've had some discussions with Danielle and the team. To try to look at what that is like, to come up with an arrangement. That really would cover any scenario going forward. Which one scenario is we can figure out a plan and we restart the plant and we use village water and wastewater services like before. At lower prices that we can get into our cost structure and handle. So that's one scenario to be able to address, okay, what rate are we able to do this at? Then the second possible alternative is the plant restarts, but it doesn't use village water and wastewater. But it still is there as backup to provide backup for water and wastewater if ever needed, and it is helpful for fire protection to have that much more supply of water. There's a fire protection tank and diesel pump there. For fire protection, but having municipal pressure and water right there in a fire situation is helpful. So that would be the scenario 2, where we would still be paying money into the village's system to be connected and have that backup, and maybe there's rates in place as backup too, that if there were brief times to use consumption water, it would be there. And then the third scenario going forward is basically like it is today, where it's just a grain elevator then. And then there's no need to even have the process connections in place at all. So we're hoping we can come up with an arrangement that covers whichever way things happen to go there. This is how it's gonna go between everybody, and everybody's okay, no matter which way it goes. So that is what we're suggesting. Makes sense for everybody, especially for planning purposes. And coming up with something that addresses things for the long run.
and my assumption would be that as we look at the numbers 1, 2, 3, 1 is your part, is your preference. Would be my
Yeah.
understanding. And
Yeah.
were you guys aware of the water, how the water was dealt with here at Blissfield prior to your purchase? Or was this something that came to light after the fact of the purchase?
No, we knew from the first time we considered this plant that the history has been processed municipal water from the river, and that this is a challenge, that has to be figured out to be able to process again there, yeah.
But to the point, we did meet prior to the purchase of the plant to discuss this issue. So this was, the subcommittee or whomever met was made aware that this was a pending. Hopeful, or
That's
let
my
me
assumption.
get over it, yeah.
Wanted to kind of get it out there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So is there a secondary water source? If there are wells large enough out there that could handle?
We don't know for sure, there is potential for wells in general to be able to supply the plant. That would be a whole nother avenue to go down, so there is a possibility for that, and that's where if we can come up with something for all three scenarios. The goal for everybody together would be whatever is the least cost for these services at the plant should be what the plant does. And yet the village and the township are still fine also, whichever way it goes, is the idea that under all three scenarios, the plant is still paying money towards the village and the township as a member of the community. But resolving the variable cost for the flows in a way separate of the net benefit to the village and the township of the difference between the actual cost to do the water versus the fees that are paid. So that's what we came to this, having these three alternatives, is whichever way it would go over the years is what ought to happen, and yet everyone's okay, and we kind of plan for whichever way it would go.
What is your time frame for having this, I mean, this discussion, if you're considering having the, in order for the fall harvest to some degree?
So. Yeah, there's not the plant could not be processing this year. Even if everything was figured out on the commercial side, there's too much that has to be done physically at the plant. So we are making progress on the grain bins and the flat storage.
Understand.
We aren't gonna make first of harvest to be able to receive and just store grain there, but we're hoping somewhat through harvest, or at least this
Right.
calendar year, to be able to at least receive and store grain. Where we're working on the bins to be able to
That would
add.
still, that would not include the need for water at that particular.
Right, no
I
water,
understand.
that would be a 2025 thing, so the quickest. If we would get the municipal water part figured out, that's already connected, where that's right on tap, literally, timing wise.
Mhm.
So if that were all figured out. We have other things we're working on, trying to figure out what they're looking like and if they're workable. If everything was figured on what we're gonna do and we pressed go. It would be many, many months, not this year, this calendar year, to process because of the work that's needed, and. Hiring roughly 40-45 more people. That alone, as well as all the work that have to get done there, because. It is, it hasn't run in over 5 years. So we don't even really know exactly what has to be done and everything, because there's a lot of complicated equipment that hasn't been even fully opened up and evaluated, but based on what we think we know. It would be sometime in 2025, but not by Christmas. I'm gonna assume,
You're not talking 24 Christmas, you're saying 20.
not by 2024 Christmas.
No, no, no.
2025 Christmas is
Oh,
possible,
2024
yes.
Christmas is coming up shortly, so you're saying any of the issue with the water, the need for the water would not be until 2025.
Right.
Right. okay.
Right.
And we're talking
No,
June-ish, let's just throw that out.
yeah, sometime
And you're just
mid
gonna
2024,
25,
2025.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
Okay,
This is off topic, but 40 to 45. New jobs in this labor market. How, how confident are you can actually get 40 to 45 people?
Well, Brad, you know, some people that work at the plant. There are some people that have approached us with some interest, and we've done overall looking at the labor market in Lenawee County, you know, within 30 miles of here. And it's not something to be underestimated. But it seemed like over a period of many, many months that those positions should be able to get filled.
Okay.
Now, whether that's, like I said, it's not that it's gonna be assumed to be easy, but that it would be a reasonable thing to get done over a period of many, many months has been what our assessment has been. But if you have some insight to share on that right here on how much worse it could be than that, we're all ears.
No, I just, you know, we're just working through hurdles. This is all great, but if there's not enough labor force to make it happen, then. So I'm just trying to think of all the impacts.
Yeah, one nice thing is it's a variety of different skills. Where it's not 100 of one skill set. Where. Yeah, we could go through the breakdown, but, so definitely a
You have
job.
operators, you have maintenance guys, yeah, I think we're all sort of familiar with that. Just to give council an idea of the investment you'd be making, median salary range for boots on the ground versus office and managers.
Yeah, so the total payroll, we've mapped out all the potential positions is about the wages to employees would be right around 3 million a year. And it ranges from on the low side, and Eric, you worked on that the most with Brad and Jamie probably, so you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think. The lower, more entry level or more shipping, receiving. On the low side is gonna be $18 to $20 an hour. Probably more 20 or more on for the shipping, receiving and. Basic, more entry level jobs, and then there will be managers up to including Brad's position. Like employee health and safety, for instance, merchandising, those are going to be salary positions that'll be much higher than that rate, so.
So what's your
It's a-
hourly top out at?
So, well, the total numbers are, I think, with everybody, including what's needed just to do the grain, it's about 50 people and $3 million.
Okay.
So,
So 40,000 annually at an entry on up. And then salary managers and VPs and executives and whatnot.
yeah,
So a significant payroll investment in Riga in Blissfield.
yeah, it's basically, it's 60,000 of gross wage is the average. Okay, right, I think my math is right, 3 million divided by 50.
Bang on.
So that's the average,
That's
plus the
right.
benefits.
State median income.
That's the one, the entry level and the higher all together, just taking the number of people and the total wages, it's about 60 average.
Tim, where does that land in Lenawee?
Well, it's not just Lenawee. I mean, his labor pool, like you said, he's at least 30 miles, 30 minutes, for 30 to 20 miles. He's within a labor pool with 500,000 people at least. But Lenawee, 60 grand, I think our 4-person family median income is $54,000 if memory serves.
So, yeah, we try to touch on a little bit of the benefits that we see here. That's where, when we look at the plan, we think there's a lot of potential for it to be beneficial for everyone involved. That's why we're optimistic, to try to roll up our sleeves on it, where the corn growers are for sure, they're gonna be seeing it most obviously, because it's gonna increase the net revenue they get for the corn, you know, all of a sudden the new demand, as well as not having to go as far with it. Right. So we try to illustrate the price to the farmer for corn should be much higher, maybe farmers have reference points on what it was versus now. As well as the direct jobs, and plus the potential for the CO2 jobs on top of our jobs. And then all the multipliers support to the plant and all the other follow-on things. Subcontractors are supporting different things that we're not doing ourselves. To the transportation is kind of a mixed bag. In some ways, there could be closer transportation, but then we're making a lot of products that are going much farther away. So between the farm community, the economic jobs and the multiplier effect and so on, we just think there's a lot of potential here and lost opportunity at the moment.
One of the concerns, for me would be the, with the, billing of the water slash sewer. Want to ensure that our residents, are not burdened with the extra cost. Because I'm sure if you've not heard, our water bills are quite heavy. So I would feel uncomfortable looking to say, well, everything that you're saying is wonderful and the prospects sound wonderful. However, we do have our residents to consider as well, as I know that you're aware of that. And I just would hate for them to have to, the 1,200 and some households have to increase their water bills, sewer bills, because of something as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's come up a little bit in the discussions we had with Danielle, and that's another reason why we're coming at it from this standpoint is if the plant doesn't run again, then there's no revenue coming into the water wastewater system. So that's the baseline. Versus if it runs, that would be for local resident, it's benefiting their bill. If we can come up with numbers that we're confident in, we look at the cost to serve is so much. If our fee is above that, then that difference is the plant's contributions to the system that are helping lower everyone else's bills of what they would be compared if the plant wasn't running at all. So that kind of lines up with what our perspective has been. We've been trying to have our perspective be what can we finagle, but what also is reasonable and will work for everyone else involved. So
It's a fine dance.
that would, yeah, so that's where you have to be confident that you know the cost to provide that water and take that wastewater. And you can compare it to the rate we're paying, and you can be confident and tell residents that the plant is paying into the water and sewer system more than our cost to serve, so they're lowering your bill. We understand that that's the way it ought to be.
Nora, do you have that? Or Daniel?
We think we have an estimate, but it's very hard to narrow down an exact cost. I guess I have a couple things, but some questions. Before I get into that, I just want to be very clear that it's not as simple as covering more than that and lowering rates for everybody else. There's a lot that goes into our rates, and I know we've hashed this out and talked about it a lot on our level, but I don't want there to be a perception that rates could go lower. And I think there's still some unknowns, but I just don't want that to be the perception going into this, and then it finds out we can't do that. I don't want that to be misleading at all. So I just want to clarify that, but I do have a couple questions, not specific to the rates, but to the water process. We had met a time before, I had asked about if you guys have the ability, because you use some of that, you send clean water back to us, and a lot of ethanol plants, my understanding, they discharge right into rivers and things like that. Is there a way for the plant to recycle that? And when I had asked that before, I'm not sure if you knew, and I didn't know if you were able to find that out or not.
So, well, there's always innovation and improvements that can happen over time, but today with the technology generally in the industry, the differential between 200 million going in and 40 million going out is after recycling all the plant can do. So that last 40 million gallons with today's technology basically can't go back in the plant with the way the water balance and everything ends up going. So I don't know if that answers your question. The technology hasn't figured out a way to get it lower.
Okay. Another question I have for you is, I don't know,
No.
like you've said before that you don't need potable water to the level that we treat it. Do you know what that level is? And is there, and I'm literally no idea what it would take to do this, it's just an idea, but would there be a way to potentially provide water to you through a different source, such as like we discharge our treated wastewater into the river? Is there a way to then take that treated wastewater and send it to the plant? It's not as treated as what we produce at the water plant, but it is clean water. But I don't know what level you need to run the plant. Is that something that you guys would be willing to consider or look at?
Well, there's a spec sheet on what the plant needs. That would be the question even, the one thing is it would require totally separate piping, right? I mean, the reason it is the way today is because then it can just take right off of the system that's serving residents. So that, I don't think I thought about whether it could take wastewater from their treatment plant. At a minimum, it would require a new pipeline to bring that specific stream back to the plant.
Right, I'm just
There's
trying to
capital
think,
cost of
if
that.
we
I don't-
couldn't, like, if our rates are our rates and we were not able to make an adjustment to those. What are some alternative ways that we could work with you guys to still provide water at maybe not the level that we treat our potable water? And so I was just trying to think outside of the box, some different ways to achieve that.
Well, one thought that seems like the capital part of it would hurt it making sense, but if the water plant had different stages of treatment that could be bypassing, like the chlorine or something, and then that stream would have to have its own dedicated pipe back to the plant. Was the only thought that
Yeah.
probably didn't make sense, but.
Yeah, we have no way to if we bypass the plant, it's like the plant in its entirety, and then you're getting river water, and my guess is you need cleaner than river raisin water.
Yeah, yes, it needs some treatment to come out of the river.
Yeah. So that would be the challenge there, but I don't know, I was just trying to think of maybe some alternative sources or
Yeah, well-
solutions to that maybe it might be more upfront costs to run that separate line, but long-term, is that more cost effective? And I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas.
Yeah,
That's gonna be my fear as well, you know, I mean. Obviously come across as pessimist quite a bit, but more realist. That's it costs us a ton of money to produce the water. And, you know, I don't think there's any other way that we go through the water treatment plant. We can't change the water treatment plant. That's Eagle standards for drinking water. We can't find it, say that has to be separate. It's just an expensive commodity right now for us. A lot of it is just wasted at the plant to send our potable water at that rate. For you guys to run it through the plant and then send it back, I don't think it makes sense. I think we need to look outside the box, come up with a different solution. I don't see us lowering rates. I don't see us capable of doing that. And I'm just trying to be honest across the board. I don't, you know, if you guys ran that capacity as promised now or in the past, Eagle's gonna make us run a 24-hour operation. That means we're adding more staffing, more wear and tear on the plant, more operational costs, that sort of thing. So much like Danielle said, it's not just give and take, there's a lot of fine tuning there to say, what can we do? Obviously, starting at the beginning, we have a terrible water source, a raw source, which is the river. Is there potential to come up with a reservoir solution, something like that? You guys have a ton of property out there. I don't see, you know, much like you're thinking with the sewer plant water coming out. Can we come up with a reservoir where we're getting a better water source, we're able to treat it at a cheaper cost than coming from the river? Maybe we have a plant on your property or something that's cleaning it to your specs before it's shipped by pipe to us. It could be sort of a
on the wastewater side.
No, the water side, it would probably be like, you know, we treated it to some extent at your plant, and then we ship the rest over to us. I think that would be more viable than the sewer water solution. I don't, frankly, I don't see us selling you guys the water at a rate from where we're producing at our waste or at our water plant now. I don't think we can lower the costs. I don't think we certainly can't put it on the backs of the residents. We can't say, again,
Right.
they'll be, they're outside right now, push pitchforks towards it already.
Well,
Because where the
let's,
water is.
let's address that. What's the base fee per month for that 10-inch line? The $22,000?
So the base fee is 21,970,107. I do want to clarify, I'm gonna talk about Blissfield rates only. Riga does charge a little bit more than that to cover their costs, so
Hold on though, so $22,000 a month. That's 12 months, is $264,000 a year. That is gonna fall back onto the residents if we don't do anything.
That's if we just walk away and they literally
That's right,
don't produce,
that's right,
but they use the 3/4 inch line
that's right.
for their.
They just cut off the 10-inch line, that money needs to be absorbed into our system. Just so you have all the facts.
Yeah, because it is kind of a complicated, weird thing to think about on the economic side, but. If you're able to come up with the incremental cost to do that much more water through the plant and our rate is above that. I keep coming back to how that is contributing and effectively is making lower bills. That is though, I'm recognizing the fact that there's. The fact that plant already exists and everything, that is all sunk cost that's not in that rate. But when we look at the two alternatives. It would still be better off for residents, I would think, but the question is at what price is it above the cost to run that additional volume?
Right.
So I think we need to think about too, so right now our fees are made up of a base fee, our availability fee that you pay regardless of usage, and then the usage fee. So that, which is how most communities do that, but when the ethanol plant runs, the way our fee structure is it says that they pay either the base fee or usage, whichever is greater, so they're not paying both. Again, that's fine, but it then in turns affects either the base fee or the usage fee for residential customers. So maybe looking at it, like, what would we change that structure? And that's not something that I have the ability to do, or Nora, like, we can build out what our costs or what our anticipated costs are. But if you guys are wanting to look at that, because maybe it makes more sense for the ethanol plant to pay and I'm not saying this for sure, but a lower base fee and usage instead of just one or the other, because then it balances out the usage and base fee for residents, but I wouldn't know that unless we had we brought in a consultant or somebody to do a rate study to show us what those different options were. I just don't have the capacity or knowledge to do that. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, because when we look at their fee, let's say they're running at 190 million gallons, our usage cost increases, but it lowers our base fee. And our base fee right now covers about 75% of our fixed costs, and then the usage is covering the other 25 in our capital. So it skews our costs when we do that. So if they're paying higher usage, that means everybody else has to pay a higher base. So how do we level that out? Or is there a way to level that out? And I think that's the answer or the information that I can't get to again, I don't have that ability. So I don't, something to consider moving forward.
You have any talented cost accountants over there at Zealand?
Well,
You're gonna have to be real talented.
yeah, I mean,
You got an actuary over there?
well, we have some accountants, but I don't know if they're actuaries.
Yeah,
That's where. There's a lot of different frameworks to use. The hard part is getting to the root driver of what the costs are, so. That is in alignment, though, some of the structure we had in mind with the three different alternatives where. We, in a way, having two different fee rates, two different meter rates, where under scenario 1 and 2, where the plant is running. There's two different scenarios, using village supply or not. So that could be covered by having a base fee that the plant pays no matter what. If it's running, it pays a fee. And that fee would be lower than it is today, but net dollars, so that even if the plant was running using other supply, it's still paying that fee to be connected. But if it's using for process, then the variable cost is a rate also there, but not the $5 whatever rate you have now to recognize the true lower cost to supply just that volume of water.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, but I think the challenge that council and myself are faced with is we have to answer then to the residents. So by doing, and that's why I'm saying, if we say that the cost for you is X and we're gonna charge you Y, that in turn impacts all of our other residential customers. And it's different based on how our fee structure is set up. Like right now, again, our base fee is covering most of our expenses, because that's what we visualize or we see as our fixed costs. We know whatever water is, we're gonna collect this amount, and then our usage, which fluctuates, is covering the smaller amount. There is the ability to change that, but what does that look like? And I think we're doing a disservice to our residents if we look at just your cost, because we still have all of that other cost that we then have. So it needs to be, I think, on our perspective, we need to look at it as a whole for everybody. What's our cost to produce X amount of water for you and our residents, and how can we best collect the fees that make sense for you and the residents?
Well, yeah, there's two different ways to look at it. I think what you described towards the end would be what would be nicknamed a postage stamp rate, where every gallon is a gallon, it doesn't matter what's driving it. So we are suggesting a different view on it, where my perspective on how this is good for residents is we have two different alternatives that we can have happen here going forward. If the plant isn't connected to the system and isn't running, if it isn't running or is running and not connected to the system, there's no revenue going to water and wastewater. So can we come up with a scenario where by being connected and using it, the plant is contributing revenue to have it be that the resident bills are actually lower than if the plant was disconnected entirely? And so how do you look at that? Whatever base fee we have, it would just strictly be what is the cost of maintaining or administering that connection versus that base fee that we're paying. So like today, in my view, especially with no water flowing, it's 22,000 a month is being subsidized to resident meters, and there's no cost to the village to do that. So the rate that would be put in place, the residents would know that that's fair and beneficial to them too, because by being connected and using water, it's contributing and effectively lowering their bills at the end of the day, regardless of how all the math and the numbers roll around for costs. But that is a very practical, raw, right down into the specific numbers type of a view.
It makes it very challenging not knowing what you're gonna use, because I think in the past, that's how we figured our budget was, okay, we're selling this much water, it's gonna cost us this much to produce it, this much to clean it, etc. And that was just looking across the board. I think from here on out, we can't do that. We have to keep a separation between what the village would need versus what you guys as a mass quantity user would be, because that's the challenge. If you guys shut down for 6 months a year or 2 months or just even 1 month. Back in the day when we did sell you guys or the previous owners, they shut down for a month, it was a 5-2 loss. So cost us 50 grand that we lost. We lost 50 grand, but we saved 20 in the production fee. So we were at a 30 net loss, 30K for the month. So again, it's very challenging for us to fine tune those numbers, say, how do we say this is how much it's going to cost us for a year to produce and sell water to not only our residents, our businesses, but also take you into account. And finding that happy medium where, again, you're contributing back, you're sort of subsidizing. I don't think it's right for us as a council to say we're gonna subsidize anymore for the future. We can't just risk that. We can't make that risk.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to know what the subsidizing happened. I can understand if there's fixed costs to serve, like if a additional person needs to be hired to do the full volume. That is cost. I understand that if we weren't running now, you have that cost in your structure and we're not doing the volume.
Mhm.
The rest of the costs, I think, are either there, water is flowing, or they go away if not, in terms of the consumables and so on. So I've been optimistic there's been ways to safeguard that. But I understand where you're coming from, I think, on the fixed cost side of it, and the additional person hired to do the max volume. I could see there, so the question is, how could an arrangement safeguard to make sure that was covered? One way is the base fee and or a notice period. But other than the potential additional person hired, I'm not aware of where the village would have hardship if water all of a sudden wasn't flowing, but that's one of the reasons we tried to explain our view of the industry and how we attempt to operate in our operating history. Was that that's also our hesitation to make sure we have everything in place before we get into hiring people and really putting money into the plant to restart, is we want to know we have something, from what we know, at least, we're confident that it's sound and we're gonna restart and not shut down again. I know that hasn't been the history here and we're just talking, you didn't know us a year ago. But that is our goal. We don't have any desire to have some plant up and down or shut off. And we have not ever done that before, but that's not something we ever want to do. There's no guarantees in anything, but.
There were some instances that you guys had addressed here were some business challenges 2 times, and I think that's what Mike is alluding to. If there is a business challenge and you are shut down for a period of time, that has been something that we have happened in the past, and we continually say up here, we need to learn from our past, and that's why we're being so critical about this, the questioning and the concern.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I get things.
We put our eggs in the basket of the alcohol plant operating, and that's what subsidized a lot of the increases. Again, the public may not like it, but again, we came out of the 2008 recession, and it took a few years to catch up there. Then we had COVID, et cetera, as well as trying to, keep rates generally where they are before rebuilding our wastewater plant. So again, it's not just the ethanol plant. These are a lot of numbers, a lot of aspects that we have to take into account. And again, we cannot just assume or budget that we're gonna be able to sell you guys 200 or 180 million a year and then set our budget, our operations that we're gonna bring this in as a guarantee. That's the fine line. I think we've learned from our past, because once the previous ethanol plant shut down, I think we raised rates 15 or 17% the year after that, just because of the amount of water that we were selling to the former owners. So it's not just a balancing act.
Well, right now, you've got a subsidized value of about $20 a month per household. So keep that in mind. So if the taps turn off, you're looking at base increase, $20 per household.
That's worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario. So we have to, I mean, if you're serious about, if you're
That worst case scenario. Clarify that.
they're gonna stop using water, they're gonna basically
Disconnect their large
the 10-inch meter.
Understand.
Okay.
It's actually $30 a month.
For all their water, but just that 10-inch line.
Per resident. If they took no water service from us and stopped paying the $255 a year, it would be just under a $30 increase a month for our
Okay.
residents,
$30.
not 20. I
Okay.
know it's only $10, but it's $10.
Well, no, it's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're serious about economic development, we've got to find some sort of concession between $20 or $30 and 0. All right, so right now, fully subsidized, no economic development, you're looking at $20+ more per month. So we're gonna have to explain something to our village residents whether or not ethanol is produced. So would you guys be willing to go to your sources to find someone to do a cost study analysis to help us better determine. But we can look at our resources as well. I don't know. I don't have any ideas who would be able to
I
do that.
reached out to Michigan Rural Water, but I've not heard from John, and unfortunately, I've not even received it.
This requires a production aspect, like a cost production aspect per unit. That's why I was asking if you had any really good cost.
Well, we could,
That's outside my wheelhouse.
we could put together some numbers that kind of lay out the two different alternatives in our view on how that would affect the village.
Yeah.
That would have to rely on some of the data that you have, Danielle, and your team, but yeah, we can put some more numbers behind what I'm verbally trying to explain.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, one of the questions that comes to mind is what are those risks to the village? Let's say we put something in place that has a much lower monthly fee in it and a much lower volume rate than the $5. What is the risk if all of a sudden we don't take water and it's just the base fee? I understand the hiring of a person to cover our volume, but are there other costs that you're having to pay all of a sudden suddenly that you're getting hurt to be aware of?
No, there'd just be variable costs as far as chemicals, and then there'd be.
Get DPW guys.
Well, it's added wear and tear too. We can't take that back once it's running, once our equipment's running additional water and.
Well, this is if they weren't taking water.
That risk,
So
that
that-
might
that-
reference
that's
if all of a sudden we would stop production.
Yeah.
What risk or harm is that doing to the village to understand that better? I understand the hiring of a person. That is that cost
That's
now
one
is
thing I can
there.
actually think of.
That makes
Because
sense, but
chemical
what else?
life can be extended, wear and tear.
The
The only one.
So
he's
it's
talking about-
not, I understand what you're saying, that is the immediate fixed cost, but it's not the only. I don't think that,
You have to separate the two issues. We're talking about ending water delivery. What costs remain? Not during water production, not the wear and tear, not everything that
but
goes
that
into.
is remaining cost
Yes,
after,
but they would
if all of a
be, but
sudden.
they would be getting billed for it prior to and be paying for it along the way. So it's like, what happens when they stop production? What happens when they stop the demand? That's the question. And the only thing is the additional labor.
It
What
can't
do we
be
make?
because the numbers don't lie. Like I said, the month that they shut down in 2019 before our next budget cycle, fortunately, was only 1 month that we had them not operating. It was a 30,000 net loss a month. It was $50,000 less in sales.
Well, I don't
And
know.
$20,000 in net
Is that-
overtime. And Nora could probably help us out with that.
Well, is that because the rate that the plant was paying had a very, very large markup that was subsidizing even more when it was running?
Probably, yes. And
So
and
that's-
that's what makes it hard to
That's
set the
great
rates.
that that was going on all those years, but it's
You would have a tier.
economically,
We would
that's.
have to have some sort of tiered system on, if we sell you a mass amount, it's a little bit cheaper. You know what I mean, than based on 50 million, 100 million, 150 or whatever. But then you have to
Yeah.
also offset the differences in wages and. In chemicals and operational costs too.
Well, the tier, that's a good example, that's kind of what we're trying to describe, is it'd be one tier for this high volume to recognize that. The cost to serve is much lower and different, it's a unique customer compared to all the other customers.
Absolutely.
We have the tiers now. There's the 3 tiers. And it is based on usage.
What's that
For
for
them.
Yeah, correct. That's how our fee structure is right now.
Isn't it go all the way up to, well, I don't know the township versus the village, but isn't the tier anything under like 15 million a month, a certain amount, and it goes down a little bit about 15? Yeah, above 4-inch meter is lower than under 4-inch. Yeah. But when you think about the current rates today, if it's $1 million a year that the plant would pay. The reality of it is, what is the actual cost to do that water? It doesn't seem like it's anywhere near that to help the plant be able to be competitive to make it go, but if it is, it is, and I don't.
Yeah, then we're selling.
Yeah,
So anything under 170 5,000 gallons per year is 661. From 175 to 200, it's 524. And then over 200, it goes to 418.
Over 200, what,
Thousand a year. Or I'm sorry, 200 million gallons per year. It goes to $4.
yeah, so we won't be over the 200, or if we are ever. gonna-
So you guys would be in that middle range at 467 per thousand. Our residents right now pay 661 per thousand.
So what volume tranche is that, 467, did you say?
That would be the 174,000 to or I'm sorry, 175,000 to 200.
But only that 25 million gallons a year at that rate,
Sorry, I keep saying thousand, it's million.
but it would only be the last 25 million at that rate?
If you're using between 175 million and 200 per year, you would pay 467
On all the gallons?
per thousand, right, on all of them. What's that?
base fee.
And no base fee,
So
correct?
that'd be, so that's the 900-ish number that.
And that's where I guess I was trying to explain that it then skews all of our fees for everybody because it's a higher usage fee to cover our costs, but then it's lower base. So it skews our entire fee structure if we keep the fees the same way that we have them now, so. I don't know,
Yeah.
it's
I don't think we should.
because it would increase the base fee for everybody else if we lowered the usage fee for you guys.
The way the water systems
The-
program
If
lays
we
out
were to
costs.
fund it under the same structure that our fees are set up now. It would increase that base fee for everybody else.
No, we can't, that was the question I was saying, you know, to.
But it's going up anyways. Ryga. What have you guys been discussing? Have you guys come up with any concessions or ideas to help?
We said talk to Blissfield. We've historically charged them 60 cents per 1,000 gallons.
Yeah, so Brian, just trying to wrap my brain around this. There is a sweet spot here. There has to be a balance where you can operate and our residents will incur larger bills, but that's gonna happen regardless.
Stop right there. Okay. What part of that am I missing? Because I'll tell you what, I don't like any of that. So let's just stop right there. Because that was not my impression. I was under the impression, no water usage, then our residents would not have to pay. Regardless, our residents are going to pay $30 more a month. When this plant goes into effect, is that correct? Yes or no?
No,
Clarify, what am I missing?
our residents would pay $30 more per month if we do not sell them any water. They disconnect from our connection. They have no access, and they don't use any.
Say that again. $30 per month.
If
Our residents.
if they disconnect all municipal service, so they wouldn't have a tap, they wouldn't use any water, nothing, because right now. They are subsidizing our residents, but they're using
20,000.
minimal, the 255,000 a
Think of
year.
it this way,
Understand.
they've got the large meter and the small meter. They'll
Yes.
keep the small meter just like any other resident or business. That would
Understand.
just be the average. If they pull that meter, much like, a resident pulling their meter out of the trailer park or whatever, we lose that base fee. So
Understand.
that's,
So when I
that
had-
250,000 or whatever that we collect from the base fee would have to go back
So the
to
base.
balancing the
Yes,
ready
I
to
missed.
serve for the residents.
Thank you for that clarifying.
So the question is, do you want the fee to go up $30 or something between 0 and 30?
Understand
That's
that,
the number we don't know.
and
That's,
that's, we don't
that's,
know.
that's the number we don't, that's the number we have to know,
Gotcha.
right? That's the number that, like, we have to get closer to it.
So when I stated the part about, ensure that the residents are not, burdened with the higher water bill, they are gonna be burdened with the
Yes.
higher water
Yeah,
bill.
either
We
way.
have to figure out, either way, they're gonna be burdened.
Can we offer enough
Okay.
concessions so that DFS can produce ethanol
Okay,
and sort of help offset some of the.
understand.
Well, the hope is that the residents are better off because we're connected and using it. Yeah, the hard part though is knowing how those numbers work to really
Yes.
to see that. Yeah, where instead of it being $30 lost benefit to the residents completely, having to be something like you talked about, James, including supplying the water though. So that the net effect, like you said it pretty well, $0 to $30 is the amount the plant is helping on the water bills, somewhere above 0 and
And
30
that's why
rather than-
you use the verbiage of saying it lowers their bill. That's what you were saying.
Yeah.
That's how I'm on your page now, but it's not gonna lower the bill.
Yeah.
The bill's already gonna go higher, but it's gonna lower it, what it could possibly be.
Because the plant has been helping $30 just sitting there, and
Mhm.
I credit Valero for continuing everything they were doing there. But it's not for the long, can't go like that forever.
Okay.
So the question is, can we come up with something where there's still some money effectively helping lower the residents' bills? Maybe less than $30, but still something, and then also is something that covers supplying water too. It's really simple when it's just a fee being paid for no water to flow. The harder part though is, what is the cost to flow the water, and then how much more do we pay to cover that supply of water?
How do we define that number?
And that's what you're saying.
Well, that's it,
It's the sweet spot, yeah,
Yeah.
and it is.
What do we have to do?
Because we don't sell, we don't take back all that sewer either, I mean, a lot of the sewer costs go away because we sell them so much water, we gotta find that sweet spot, and that's the challenge.
And that's where Danielle was saying with the,
That's why we need a cost account.
with the, with.
Well, we can put some things together to kind of show a couple different scenarios, the way we understand them.
Yeah.
It was coming from us.
Yeah, well, no, we'll look for some, I think at this point we have to start thinking about. Maybe reaching out to the auditors, see if they can help direct us. There's gotta be some for higher cost analysis services.
Well, that's what I think. I mean, if we wanna keep the same structure we have now, I am able to calculate that out and look at it, but in doing that, I just don't know that we're gonna find that spot that we all want to, that they wanna be at and that we want our residents to be at. So that's where I had mentioned that earlier. I almost think we need to bring in like a consultant or somebody that, cause again, I can do what we do now, but is that the best way? I don't know.
It is a unique cost accounting type of view
It
or
is,
analysis.
it is, because there's some variables there and then there's some fixed. And then, yeah, and then you've got to build out a structure for, 2% increase over time.
Well, look what the water plant, the water plant, we're at 25 years now, right? And look at what we put into it this year, just for replacement costs on the wear and tear without producing twice as much water. And so again, there are a large number of variables where we do need those.
Is that the increase, Nora? Double the production?
Yes, right now we're doing about 300,000 gallons, so yes, they're gonna be about, what do we say, about 564,000
Per month?
that they're gonna, no,
Oh,
per day.
Yeah, it's at 5 to 550.
Yeah.
Over it out.
So it's gonna,
so that's a
it's
200%
almost double,
increase.
so I can do it, we'll have to spread out. I will
And
need
that plant is actually built for that capacity.
1.4, yes, so we're under what our plant can run. Capacity can run in 24 hours. So I would be able to do it in 18, right now we're working 8, so I will work 2 full shifts. As Eagle looks at it, they might push us to 24. It's something we had talked about previously before Valero went down. when Valero, because we were running over 75% of our capacity in our plant. So we lost redundancy and safety precautions for our plant, 'cause we're just pushing water through a lot quicker. So that's why, at that point, we were looking at about $100,000 project to add another high service pump. We were looking at, some potential adding filters, adding some treatment. So there would be, if they put us into 3 shifts, which I think
They
might
will, they'll wanna.
be down the road, it's a discussion we had before, there's gonna be some capital.
And you run 355 days a year,
24/7.
355.
Yeah, it's pretty steady flow, isn't it, guys? Yeah, I mean, there could be an unexpected 4 hours of plant, but the fermentation's still going, so.
Is there a gap and do you guys do like a window, like say between Christmas and New Year's where you have plant shut down?
There's
Usually in the fall.
two scheduled shutdowns a year, usually about 4.5 days each.
Spring and fall?
Yeah,
So that second option scares me with the variable and emergency, because my plant just can't go from producing 350,000 today to I need 600,000 gallons tomorrow. I can't do that. Hydraulically, we would blow our plant.
yeah,
I need time, so
that scenario is like a 2 to 4 hour period of firefighting, so how many gallons are in the tank typically?
Okay,
Well, I don't know, that's like, we have that scenario elsewhere, but it would literally be like a 4 hour or less time period where there literally was a fire that they wanted a lot of water at once. We have.
your tank or the water tower?
Your water tower would be where it could augment, but we haven't gotten into that specifics, but we have a water tank. And we have our own diesel pump.
Right.
For those situations, it's just that. It could help to fight a fire better for a brief 2 to 4 hour period if it was
I think she
connected.
was talking about the down days.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're talking more,
Yeah, not the
Okay.
increase, the
Yeah.
decrease.
oh, if we're processing,
Even,
we're gonna know ahead of time which 4 days the plant will be shut down. I don't know if there's still some water flowing
There's still
for
some.
firm,
we may use about 500, 100, so.
but it's 8 or 10 days a year when we know weeks or months ahead of time that we won't be using water those days. Or much.
Then it could go once a year, so at some point.
One of our plants is one time a year it shuts down for 5 or 6 days, huh?
We're all going one, probably at some point.
so Mr. Bauer, correct? Brower, I apologize.
Let's guess.
Do you know any consultants that could help look at this? Because you do consulting for water and wastewater, correct?
Yeah, we've got a couple names we can get to.
Thank you.
Well, Nora said double that water uses 1 employee or 2 employees, you gotta have
I could do one
this one.
until Eagle tells us that we have to go 24. But I can run the plant for 18. And, I'm 1 additional operator right now.
How difficult is gonna be to hire 1 operator?
Well, you're talking 355 days a year, so you've got weekend shifts,
Yeah, just one, just one will cover it.
just one?
Yeah, because right now we have 4.
If we have to go to 24 hours,
Then
they
I
would be, need more.
Okay,
I think we should budget for the 24 because Eagle's gonna do it, they're doing more and more. They wanted us back in 18, 19 to add that 3rd shift when they were right back at capacity. Again, we have to play it safe, you know, village finances.
all right, well. Anything else? I guess consultants are next. Very informative, thank you. I think there is something here, I hope there is. This would be beneficial to everyone involved. Any questions from Riga, Nora? By the way,
Well,
How fast can we move forward on something?
I don't know.
About finding a consultant, I can get them in here and do a study. Yeah, we wanna jump on the.
Brian, you must have some kind of an idea of what level you need to be at for your monthly base fee as well as your per 1,000 gallon.
Yeah, we've been thinking about this for a couple of months now, trying to look at all sides. I've seen if there's a number that, a structure of a base fee and a volume that would be beneficial to the village and be something we think we can swing in the cost structure of the plant among everything else we're working on. So
Are
we
you
have been
fine-tuning
thinking, we
it?
have ideas and thoughts of what that could be.
Well, that's where when we talked last year in our little subcommittee. We couldn't produce it, but what you were expecting, and that's my fear. That's my fear of using our water plant. Are there other solutions outside the box where we pre-treat something and you're using a less than drinkable potable water? I mean, it's just, that's the ugly reality of it, is it costs, how much it costs to produce it and go through that plant, and we can't separate the plant to give you somewhat filtrated water versus fully. Yes.
And that river's starting point.
Yep. Yeah, I did all the talking, but maybe you guys have things, if there's something that you gotta correct that I said, or you have more to add or different views, but I didn't have to do all the talking. All three of you have anything else you wanna share? We have everyone here.
There are two others. Anybody there, your relative that you're talking
They should
to?
talk instead of me.
No, we appreciate, the time and. Got consultants or that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has the skill set here to really zero in on that range where we will have a better idea. I think spending the money and taking that, you know, few weeks to get a consultant here is well worth the value, so.
And I certainly don't want to come across as, you know, negative. I want to see it happen. Obviously, you get the offshoot, you know, we get collect jobs, you get the railroad involved, things like that. That's going to benefit the community. But again, we can't do it on the back of the regular residents that are paying the rates that they currently are. We have to separate that in order to make it work.
Their water bills be $200. Their water bills be over $200.
Yeah, we wanna make sure it's clear that we aren't
Yes.
We aren't here to ask for the village or residents to subsidize the plant. We're not asking for that. We're hoping that if we can truly understand what the cost to serve is, which isn't easy, it is hard. Nora, it sounds like, I mean, you live it every day with your job and know a lot of it. The hope has been that if we can get a good understanding that we all feel is correct, that there is something down the middle that can work. That's the hope. And so I think our only goal is to fully explore that. And if it doesn't work out, we know it's because we rooted out the facts and it just wasn't gonna work that way. And not have a solution that would be there to roll up our sleeves, go not covered or used if it's there. I think that's really our goal, our hope here.
I think, Eric, was you asking for that number tonight?
Well, I mean, it would be nice to know what that number is, but I'm not sure if they know exactly what that is, if they're still trying to fine tune that.
Yeah, we've been running fingers ourselves. I don't know if we have a specific number, but we have ideas of a range. My thoughts are that Danielle has some ideas on the consultant side, and Kurt, if you have someone to recommend, maybe they're the same or different, they can look at it. Also internally, we have done more of a cost accountant's view, trying to look at the village and the plant side of it, so we could share some of from our understanding of what that looks like under the different scenarios and share that, and then that could evolve into actually sharing, you know, a specific potential rate that we would suggest.
And there's a lot of moving parts. And I think everybody up here understands that. It's just trying to get to that, what is that final?
I understand now.
What are what are the variables that come into play?
Yeah.
And how do they affect everything as a whole?
Brian, do you know what you pay for water at your other facilities that are not served by municipal water? Because I'm sure there's some cost to that with the wells and pumps and things.
Yes, yeah, and so and by the way, when we get our 200 water and 40 wastewater, our plant in Nebraska is of similar size to this plant. And so we have 15 years of operating data out there running production rates we know consistently. And it is more pushing that, you know, it could be 180 to 200 and 35 to 40, but not the 160. But they are different plants, but they started out pretty similar. So our reference point is from there. So that plant when it was built originally, it has 2 wells. And a water tank, so there was capital cost to put those wells in and getting it connected with the tank, but today now, every year when we run. We have, what are they, 10, 20 horse motors. On each well that they don't run at the same time, they're set up where one well will run for 6-8 hours and fill the tank and shut off. Then the next time the other wells, they wear out evenly, so you have the electric cost of the
You treat it
wells.
at all?
Not much,
Well,
there's,
The well water majority goes in the process as is. And then the rest would be obviously softened or RO to the boilers or cooling tower.
And that's the ugliness of us selling bottled water.
Yeah, so-
To the plant for really no valid reason.
well, so that's an example there is we have the electric and we're maintaining the wells and maintaining the pipe and tank. And there's a little bit of treatment probably going on. But like what you just described, nothing in like tanks or anything, but process flow. So what would,
Closest thing we got to what you got is our plant Pennsylvania, we're pumping 1 million gallons a day out of the river. For the plant's needs. So,
yeah,
and then we found there, this is kind of where we're getting to the cost of service. When we were making 500,000 gallons of water a day, it may have cost us X to make the water. When we started making 800,000 gallons a day, it only cost us Y to make the water, because of the economies of the plant. It's not a 1-for-1 ratio, just because you made 500 and now you're making 1 million. It don't cost the same.
It's not 2x.
Yeah,
yeah, so.
and then,
So at the Nebraska plant, you have electric and maintenance on the well and pipe and a little bit of treatment. Off the top of my head, it's maybe 50,000 a year. There, and then the Pennsylvania plant is unique in that plant, when it was built, it didn't connect to municipal either. That river, I think, is different than this river. It's not probably as tough of a treatment, but that one pulls out of the river. And has some processing than it does, and then the wastewater we're talking about just goes back to that same river. And that is more than 50, that's twice the volume of water. I would say that's probably in the $100,000 to $200,000 range because of the treatment going on. So that's broad, that's about what that is, that's after capital was invested when the plant was built, though, to be able to do those things.
When we created our rates, just you go to Riga and then they pass it on, right? You're saying 60 cents or whatever, that was later on per gallon. Was that paying off the original investment on the lines? Or is that just your sort of maintenance?
It was that income did get applied to debt, so Raga doesn't have any debt load. We paid off our debt and half the amount of
So
time.
there's a potential of, again, you want some sort of maintenance fund.
So it's going to
Oh,
operations.
it would
and
go down.
maintenance.
Potentially.
Yeah, so we're having discussions with Riga Township also to look at. What they are looking at for their margin to see what they can do to help work with us, where they're still getting some money and they're okay and being benefited. How much does that have to be to help the numbers work as much as possible? So we're going to each of you directly. To see what
There's
is
so many
possible.
aspects that, we need
Yeah.
a consultant in here, so.
Yeah, I think it's value served though, to have a consultant come in and look at it. So, all right, council, any other questions, comments?
No.
Listen. Brian and crew, any other questions, comments?
I ran my mouth plenty and I could probably think of something else. Well, just want to thank everyone for putting the time to come and join us tonight and just go through all this and be willing to roll up your sleeves and look at it to see what could happen. So thank you for your time and all the discussion. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate the investment so far and hopefully we can partner up and do a lot more. All right,
We got plans.
Danielle, anything else before I call it? All right, so we're back Monday for a regular scheduled village meeting. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.